My name is Claire, and I offered to help plan my brother's wedding. But instead, I was humiliated in front of our entire family. His fiancée looked me in the eye and said it was a private matter, like I was nothing more than an outsider. But she forgot one thing: I don't disappear quietly. Before we dive in, I want to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories reach. You'd think being the sister of the groom would earn you a seat at the planning table, especially when the wedding is set in a place like this. Golden vines stretching out in every direction, the Napa sun catching every glint of champagne. But apparently, blood doesn't count when someone like Harper is calling the shots. Matthew, my brother, my best friend growing up, had always talked about getting married under an oak tree. Our backyard had one just like it when we were kids, and we'd pretend it was a castle. I thought helping him find the perfect vineyard would be a way to bring that memory full circle. That was my first mistake. "Claire," Harper said, her tone clipped like she was trying to swat a mosquito. "We've actually got it covered." I blinked. We were standing under the trellis near the main tasting room, surrounded by family, staff, and Harper's bridesmaids who were all watching like it was a tennis match. "Oh," I said, trying to keep it light. "I just thought I'd offer a hand. I've got some experience organizing events," and she cut me off. "We'll be doing everything ourselves. It's a private matter." Her voice rang out in the stillness, crisp and clear. And then she smiled. That kind of smile you practice in the mirror when you want to look polite but make someone feel 2 inches tall. I laughed softly, a reflex. "Well, you've got a lot on your plate. Just know I'm here if you need." "No, Claire," she said, louder now and with just enough edge to make sure the staff setting up tastings paused mid-pour. "We won't need anything." The air changed. I could feel it like the shift right before a summer storm. That quiet crackle when everyone's still pretending it's sunny. I caught Matthew's eye. He looked uncomfortable, not confused, not surprised, just uncomfortable, and that stung more than I expected. "I wasn't trying to step on toes," I said, keeping my voice even as I glanced at our mom, June, who was pretending to adjust a napkin to avoid eye contact. "I just wanted to help." But Harper was already turning, her voice bright again as she called over her shoulder to one of the bridesmaids. "Let's go over the centerpiece options. These need to be exactly right." She never looked back. Everyone dispersed quickly, as if they didn't want to be caught in the awkward air left behind. I stood there, my offer of help still suspended in the space between us, untouched and unwanted. Matthew walked past a few minutes later, ruffling my hair like he used to when we were kids. "Don't take it personally," he mumbled. Too late. It wasn't just rejection. It was exile. I'd grown up being the fixer, the one who stayed after family dinners to do dishes, who remembered birthdays, who helped Matthew pass freshman algebra by making index cards and quizzing him until midnight. I wasn't looking for a spotlight. I just wanted to feel like I belonged. But in that moment, on that sunlit deck overlooking the most expensive view I'd ever seen, I realized Harper wasn't going to let that happen. And worse, no one was going to stop her. Have you ever been pushed out of something that used to feel like home? Stick around. Because what they didn't know was that I may have been shut out. But I wasn't finished. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept replaying Harper's voice, each word hitting like tiny glass shards. "We won't need anything." Not "thank you," not even "let's talk later." Just a door slammed in my face with a smile. But by morning, the sting of humiliation had morphed into something else. Resolve. They didn't want my help. Fine. But I wasn't doing this for Harper. I was doing it for Matthew. For the brother who once taped together my broken tiara after I tripped during our third-grade talent show. The same kid who made me pancakes shaped like stars after my first breakup. He might have forgotten that bond lately, but I hadn't. So I started quietly. No announcements. No emails, just action. I used my lunch breaks at the cozy cafe where I worked part-time to start calling vendors. "Hi, this is Claire Halston, sister of the groom." I'd begin, voice smooth and cheerful. "Yes, we're planning a wedding at Whispering Oaks Vineyard." I didn't mention Harper. Didn't need to. This wasn't sabotage. It was support. I was filling in the blanks, making sure the date had backup options, that caterers were secured, that the venue had all the details it needed. I even booked a tentative florist and arranged a meeting with a local decorator. Using my own savings felt risky, but it wasn't about money. It was about anchoring something before it drifted out of reach. The cafe became my headquarters. There was something comforting about the clink of cups and the low hum of conversation while I drafted vendor agreements and reviewed menu options. Lena, the owner, gave me the corner booth without asking. "You planning something important?" she asked one afternoon, wiping down the counter. "Just trying to keep a family from falling apart," I said. She smiled, but her eyes lingered a second longer than usual. Maybe she recognized that particular brand of quiet desperation. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, not even Matthew, especially not Mom. I was threading a needle, hoping that if I pulled everything together seamlessly, Harper just might come around. Maybe she'd see that I wasn't a threat, maybe she'd even say thank you. But hope is a dangerous investment. One evening, after finalizing the cake tasting appointment, I looked at my bank account and flinched. A few too many deposits gone. A little too much faith spent. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling slightly. Was I being delusional? I tried to shake it off. This was for Matthew. This was love. That night, I pulled out the old photo album from my closet. Page after page of birthdays, school plays, soccer games. One picture stopped me cold, Matthew, age 12, grinning with 2 missing teeth, his arms slung around me as we held up a lopsided gingerbread house we'd built for Mom's Christmas party. That was before everything got so scripted. Before Mom started curating our lives like we were her personal PR project. Before Harper. I snapped the album shut. This wedding had become a performance, and I was done being the audience. The next day, while finalizing the centerpiece orders, I received a confirmation email with the vendor's receipt attached, personalized under Claire Halston, event coordinator. That title. It wasn't official. But for a brief moment, it felt like power, like I was writing myself back into the story. Until a text popped up from Harper. "Please stop contacting vendors. This is overstepping. Stay in your lane." No greeting, no punctuation, just a threat dressed in passive aggression. I didn't respond, but I saved the message, because I had a feeling I wasn't the only one keeping records now. The barn was beautiful in a way that made you feel like you were trespassing in someone else's dream. Twinkle lights draped from the exposed rafters. Tables lined with ivory runners and wildflowers gave everything a storybook glow. Harper had gotten her vision just right. It was romantic, curated, effortless. But as I stood in the corner, balancing a paper-thin champagne flute, I felt like a placeholder. Someone you invite so they don't complain. Someone whose name is spelled right on the card but wrong in the tone. Matthew looked good, genuinely happy, maybe even proud. I tried to hold on to that. I told myself this is for him, all of it. My time, my savings, my energy. I kept to the side as people streamed in, family members I hadn't seen in years, neighbors, coworkers. The air buzzed with small talk and wine. I spotted June, our mother, at a table near the head, adjusting place cards, already fussing over Harper's vision like it was her own. She didn't look at me. Or maybe she did and just didn't stop long enough to make it matter. And then Matthew tapped his glass. The dull clink echoed, pulling everyone's attention toward the head table. He stood, looking freshly pressed and boyishly charming in his slate gray suit. "I just want to take a minute," he began, "to thank the people who made this night so special." I held my breath. He looked around the room, paused a second too long on Harper, who gave him the softest, most rehearsed smile. Then his eyes met mine. "And Claire," he said, and just like that, I forgot how to breathe. "You've always been my rock. From the time I couldn't tie my shoes to, well, you showed up, you always do. Even when things got messy, you make hard things easier." The room gave a warm little awe of approval. I couldn't move, he remembered. Despite everything, he still saw me. I swallowed down the knot in my throat, blinking fast. I caught Harper's expression then, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Something cold simmered beneath her lip gloss and blush. She leaned toward the mic. "Yes," she said sweetly, her voice like butter sliding over a blade. "Claire's always available." The words landed like a slap. People laughed quiet, confused, not sure if it was a joke or just weird. I smiled, barely, because I knew exactly what she meant. She wasn't calling me supportive. She was calling me pathetic, always available. The girl who hangs around hoping for scraps. The sister who doesn't know when to go home. Matthew didn't laugh. He gave her a tight glance, one I couldn't read, but said nothing. The moment passed. The toast ended. And just like that, it was like I didn't exist again. The music kicked up and guests spilled onto the dance floor, smiling and clinking glasses like nothing had happened. I stayed near the back, watching Harper weave through guests like a swan through cattails, always in the center of the ripple, never ruffled. Later, I stepped out onto the gravel path behind the barn. My heels sank into the earth as I walked farther from the laughter, needing the quiet to think. Then I heard her footsteps, Harper. She stopped just a few paces behind me, arms crossed, a smirk playing at her lips. "This day is about family," she said softly. I turned. "I am family." She tilted her head, the candlelight catching her earrings. "Real family, not whatever performance you've been giving, always playing helper, always sneaking around." "I wasn't sneaking," I said, voice low but firm. "I was trying to help. You were interfering." Her voice sharpened like a shard of glass wrapped in silk. "Let me be very clear, Claire, I don't want you involved, not tomorrow, not the morning of, not even in the background." I blinked, my mouth parting. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "This wedding is mine, stay out of it." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "Matthew's my brother, and he's my husband," she shot back. "Soon. Which means your role here is over." The words hung in the air, heavy and humiliating. "You don't get to erase me," I said. She smiled, a slow, amused thing. "Watch me." Then she turned and walked back toward the barn, hips swaying like she just landed a winning move in some cruel, private game. I stood there for a long time, the cold air wrapping around my shoulders like a warning. Something cracked inside me then. A small, quiet snap. I had been gracious, accommodating, silent. I had let her dictate the rules. I had played the background role in my own family's life. But I wasn't going to stay there. Not anymore. The vineyard terrace looked like something out of a wedding magazine, rows of tiny candles floating in glass bowls, warm lights wound through the railing, and the glow of lanterns spilling out from the barn behind us. But all I could feel was the chill that Harper left in her wake. She didn't shout. She didn't throw a scene. She just dropped her threat like poison in a wine glass and walked away. And that somehow was worse. I stood there motionless for a full minute, heart hammering behind my ribs. I could still hear her voice echoing. "This day is only for real family. Don't spoil it." I gripped the wooden railing until my fingers hurt. What did she think I'd do? Apologize? Step back and watch her marry my brother like she was doing all of us a favor? I turned on my heel and went looking for Matthew. He needed to know. He had to hear what she said. This wasn't about petty comments anymore. This was about being erased from his life. The barn was quieter now, guests meandering toward their cars, couples saying long goodbyes. I spotted him by the dessert table, laughing with one of Harper's cousins, his hand loosely resting on a slice of lemon tart. "Matt," I called. He looked up, surprised. "Hey, you okay? Can we talk, just for a second?" I asked. "Sure." I led him toward a side hall lined with wine barrels and little fairy lights. I didn't want to ruin the night, but I couldn't let this go unsaid. "She cornered me," I began, "Harper, on the terrace." He blinked. "Okay, she told me not to come to the wedding. She said the day was for real family and told me to stay out of the way." His face tightened, but he didn't look shocked, not really. "Claire," he started, reaching up to rub the back of his neck. "You know how she gets. She's just stressed. All this planning, it's intense." I stared at him. "That's your response, stress." "She's nervous, her family's watching, every detail has to be perfect. She didn't mean it that way." "No, Matthew, she did. She meant it exactly that way." Silence stretched between us. "She doesn't want me there," I said quietly. He exhaled, looking genuinely pained. "It's not like that." "Then what's it like?" He didn't answer, not really. Instead, he looked away. That was when I knew. He wouldn't fight for me. Not here. Not now. Maybe not ever. I walked away before he could say anything else. Before I said something I couldn't take back. I drove home in silence. No music. No headlights behind me. Just the slow realization that I was alone in this. I unlocked the door to my apartment and stood in the dark for a long time, just letting the quiet wrap around me like armor. Then I lit a candle on my kitchen table and opened my laptop. The wedding spreadsheet was still open, the one Harper didn't know existed. I stared at the tabs, catering, flowers, rentals, deposits, all under my name, all built piece by piece over the last 4 months. They had no idea how much was balanced on my efforts. They thought I was out of the way, that I'd been dismissed. But I held everything. And suddenly, for the first time since this mess began, I didn't feel helpless. I felt steady. I clicked the Edit tab on the florist's invoice and hovered over the cancellation button. My heart beat fast, not with fear, but with something sharper. Power. I closed the screen. Not yet, not tonight, but soon. They wanted me out of the picture. Fine. Let's see how well the picture holds together without me. I woke up the next morning with a strange ache in my chest. Not heartbreak exactly. It was heavier than that. Something deeper, like a mourning for something still alive but slowly vanishing, like standing outside your childhood home and realizing no one remembers you lived there. My phone buzzed. A text from Harper. "Hope you got some rest. Please don't bring up our little chat again. It'll just create tension for everyone." A smiley face followed. Passive aggression in emoji form. I didn't respond. Instead, I showered, dressed, and drove to the one place I knew I shouldn't have to explain myself, my mother's. Growing up, June Halston was the kind of woman who could slice a grapefruit into eighths without breaking eye contact. Controlled, polished, an expert in handling things silently. I figured if anyone would listen, it would be her. When I arrived, the front door was open, soft classical music playing from the speakers in the living room. I stepped inside, immediately hit with the smell of lemon polish and fresh hydrangeas. "Mom," I called out. "In here," she replied lightly. She was in the dining room, reorganizing silverware of all things. Her face lit up, but only for a second. The warmth faded quickly, replaced with something tight and unreadable. "You're up early," she said, setting a napkin just so. "I needed to talk to you," I said. Her hands didn't stop moving. "It's about Harper. Last night she told me not to come to the wedding, said it was for real family." Mom stilled, just for a breath. I waited for her to say something. Anything. She sighed, picking up another fork. "Claire, you know how weddings can be. Emotions are high. People say things they don't mean." "She meant it," I insisted. "She cornered me, Mom, threatened me. She's just nervous. Everything's gotten so big, so elaborate. And you," she paused, "you do tend to overstep sometimes." I stared at her. "Overstep? You're involved, very involved," she said carefully, like each word was balancing on a knife's edge. "You always take charge. That can be overwhelming." I opened my mouth, then shut it again. How many times had I stepped in because no one else would? "I stepped in to help," I said finally. "Because no one asked me to, yes, but because Matthew is my brother and I love him." She looked at me then, really looked. And then she said, "Let Matthew be happy." My throat closed. "That's what this is about?" I asked, stunned. "Keeping him happy means cutting me out." "No one is cutting you out," she said, her voice now low and cool. "You're just making things harder." I felt my face flush. "I paid deposits," I said. "I booked venues, coordinated vendors, and I did it because I thought I was helping our family. But you're telling me that by doing that without Harper's permission, I've made things worse." "Harper didn't ask you to do any of that," she said simply. "She wants control. You should respect that." "But I was doing this for him," I said, voice cracking. "And maybe that's the problem," she replied. Silence spread between us like a storm cloud. I took a slow breath. "If I hadn't done anything, you'd all be panicking right now." June picked up another fork. "I'm asking you to be the bigger person, Claire," she said. "Please don't make a scene." The words sliced deep. She wasn't going to defend me. Not now, maybe not ever. I left without another word, the door clicking shut behind me louder than I intended. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel. I sat in the car for a full minute before starting it. Don't make a scene. How many times had I been told that growing up? When someone took credit for my school project, when a friend ghosted me, when a teacher gave Matthew praise for a group assignment I carried. Don't make a scene, be quiet, be helpful, be available. Always, not anymore. That afternoon, I opened my laptop again and went to work. One by one, I began canceling contracts. I started with the florist, then the lighting, the decorator, the pastry chef, the tableware rentals. Each call ended the same. "Yes, please refund the deposit. The event is no longer proceeding under my coordination." My hands were steady now. My heart wasn't racing. For every cancellation, I made a note. For every refund, I sent it to a separate savings account. Not a penny of it would return to Harper's hands. They didn't want me involved, wish granted, but they forgot something. Everything was in my name. If you've never canceled an entire wedding from behind a laptop screen, let me tell you, it's not chaos. Not at first. It's quiet, calculated, satisfying in a way that shouldn't be, like watching a house of cards collapse in reverse, slow, steady flicks until the bottom pieces disappear. By sunset, my inbox was full of refund confirmations and per your request emails. Every vendor I'd personally coordinated was now out, gone. And not just canceled, but canceled with notice in writing with every term respected. Because I wasn't burning things down in a tantrum, I was dismantling them. Neatly, legally, efficiently. That's what they never understood. They thought being always available meant being soft, compliant, disposable. But people like me, we don't just help, we build. And we know exactly how to take it all apart. I closed my laptop and leaned back, listening to the echo of silence in my apartment. The kind of silence that isn't lonely, but earned. I'd left the core pieces intact. The venue was still booked, the date still held. I wasn't trying to destroy the wedding, just remove the parts that came from me. The parts they never asked for but relied on. A few days passed without incident. I went to work. I cleaned. I slept like I hadn't in weeks, until the calls started. First was from the decorator. "Hey Claire, I know you said to cancel, but the bride just showed up at the shop demanding to see mock-ups. Said she had no idea the order was pulled." I paused. "She didn't." She flipped, claimed there must have been a mistake, said you had no authority. I smiled slightly. "Was the invoice in my name?" "Yep." "Then there's no mistake." I hung up before she could ask more. That was the first sign Harper had lost control, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. Within hours, more calls trickled in. The caterer, the flower vendor, the rental coordinator, all calling to confirm that yes, Harper had come storming in, demanding explanations, only to learn, painfully, that none of it was under her name. That without me she had no legal pull, no signed contracts, no paper trail. I'd never seen her unravel, but I imagined it, her perfect posture cracking, her voice getting sharp. The way she probably threw around phrases like "my wedding" and "do you know who I am?" The irony. They didn't. Because I was the one who'd built the thing. I didn't gloat, not really, but I did light a candle, ordered in sushi, watched a movie while my phone buzzed endlessly on silent. They'd call, they'd try to shame me, beg me, threaten me, and I would listen when I was ready. That evening I stood in front of the mirror and really looked at myself, not just at the tired eyes or the slight lines near my mouth from weeks of stress, but at the woman staring back. I didn't look angry. I looked clear. For the first time in this entire mess, I wasn't doubting myself. I wasn't trying to rewrite the past. I wasn't replaying old wounds or wondering if I was being too sensitive. I was acting, decisively, intentionally. The next morning, I opened my email and found one that made me pause. Subject: urgent event status. It was from the vineyard manager. A polite inquiry asking for clarification on who was the authorized point of contact moving forward, because Harper had shown up in person. Again, this time she wasn't just angry, she was panicked. The staff had apparently watched her spiral in real time, her voice rising, her logic fraying, her insistence that there must be a mistake. The mistake, of course, was assuming that kindness equals permission. She thought I'd stay silent forever. She thought I'd let myself be erased. But I hadn't vanished. I'd simply gone quiet. And now the silence was louder than any speech I could have made. I didn't need to be there to picture the scene. Harper standing in the middle of the bridal boutique in downtown Napa, surrounded by swatches and silence, clutching a clipboard she didn't understand and a timeline that no longer existed. Vendors were pulling out. Orders were on hold pending confirmation. Calls were going unanswered because I had already spoken to everyone. And they knew who the real point of contact was. Me, the one with the signatures, the deposit receipts, the contracts. And now Harper had walked straight into the truth. She wasn't in control. The boutique owner left me a voicemail, half amused, half apologetic. She showed up unannounced, demanding final fittings and complaining about missing confirmations. I told her everything was paused per your instruction. Pause, deep breath. Claire, she started crying. Not sobbing, not grief, anger, panic, public embarrassment. She said you were sabotaging her. I almost laughed. Sabotage? No, sabotage is reckless. This, what I had done, was deliberate, calculated, reversible, but only on my terms. That afternoon, I opened a new spreadsheet. Not to rebuild, not yet, just to track the fallout. I listed every vendor I'd canceled and logged each one that had since contacted me about Harper's frantic attempts to take over. 8 so far, with more trickling in by the hour. Most of them were professional about it. Some were sympathetic. She seemed unprepared, one florist said carefully. She thought Pinterest was a contract, joked the tableware vendor. She said she'd sue if we didn't reinstate her, the caterer added. We reminded her there's no legal ground to do that. My favorite was the decorator, who ended her voicemail with, "Honestly, you're better off without her." I wasn't looking for validation, but it came anyway. Matthew hadn't reached out, not once, and I couldn't tell if that was cowardice or loyalty to Harper. But either way, the silence was damning. And then, just after sunset, it happened. A knock on my door. I stood still, listening. Another knock, sharper this time. Then a pause, a shuffle of feet. I opened the door to find Harper standing there. Hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, lipstick barely smudged, jaw clenched so tight I could see the strain in her temples. Behind her stood June, our mother, arms folded, lips pressed into a line of polite horror. "Can we come in?" Harper asked. I didn't answer right away. I just held the door open, wide enough for the tension to crawl through. We sat in the living room, me on the armchair, them side by side on the couch like it was a formal mediation. "Claire," June began, her voice practiced and tight. "There's been some confusion." "No," I said calmly, "there hasn't." Harper inhaled sharply. "I know what you're doing," she said. "You're trying to embarrass me, to ruin the wedding." I tilted my head. "Is that what you think this is?" "You canceled everything," she snapped. "You called vendors behind my back." "No," I corrected. "I canceled the things I planned, the things I paid for, the things you and everyone else told me I had no right to be involved in." She blinked. "You wanted me out of the way," I continued. "You made that very clear, so I stepped back and took everything that was mine with me." June shifted uncomfortably. "You're punishing your brother," she said. "No," I said softly. "I'm protecting myself." Harper leaned forward then, desperate. "We can fix this, just call them back. Put everything back the way it was." I almost laughed. "Back to what? Being invisible, doing all the work while you take the credit?" She looked at June for support, but June said nothing. For the first time, her silence served me. Harper's voice cracked. "This is my wedding. And this is my boundary," I replied. "It's not my job to clean up your mess." She stood abruptly. "You're ruining everything." "No," I said, rising slowly to meet her gaze. "You just finally found out what it's like to not have someone fix things for you." The words hung in the air like smoke. June finally spoke. "Claire, please, just think about what you're doing." "I already have." They left without another word. The door closed gently, but inside me, something slammed shut for good. It didn't take long. Less than 12 hours after the failed peace treaty in my living room, word got out. First came the flurry of texts from mutual friends. "Is it true the wedding's canceled? I heard there's no food or flowers booked. What happened?" Harper looked like she was going to faint when I saw her at the boutique. And then one by one the questions stopped, replaced by silence, which, as I've learned, is louder than gossip. I knew what came next. They would try again. I was halfway through making tea the next morning when the knock came, this time louder, less polite. I opened the door already braced. Matthew stood there. Behind him, June, and Harper again. This time, though, Harper didn't speak first. June did. "Claire," she said, her voice cracking just slightly. "We need your help." There it was, not a demand, not a manipulation, a plea. They stepped inside without waiting. Harper looked frayed, her pristine exterior showing signs of stress, smudged mascara, split ends, a blouse buttoned unevenly. She didn't meet my eyes. Matthew looked lost. "I didn't know," he said, "about how much you did until all of this." I didn't reply. "I should have asked," he added. "I should have backed you up." Still, I said nothing, because this wasn't about apologies, it was about accountability. Harper finally spoke, her voice small but sharp. "I panicked. I didn't think you'd actually do it, cancel everything." "You told me to stay out of it," I reminded her. "I know," she said, wringing her hands. "I thought if I could just keep control." You didn't want control, I interrupted. You wanted credit, you wanted the spotlight. You wanted the illusion of effort without the work. June winced at that but didn't defend her, for once. Matthew cleared his throat. The guests start arriving tonight. We've got nothing. The venue's still intact, but it looks like an empty room, I finished. He nodded. Silence again. Then Harper took a step forward. Claire, I'm sorry, she said. I shouldn't have said those things. I shouldn't have pushed you out. I crossed my arms. Are you sorry because you hurt me or because now you need me? Harper's mouth opened, closed. I looked at June. Do you still think I'm making things harder? June's eyes filled, but her voice stayed flat. I think we made a mistake. You didn't make a mistake, I said. You made a choice. And now here we were. Matthew sat down heavily on the edge of my couch. We're asking, can you fix it? Just like that, as if fixing it was an easy button I could press. As if everything they'd said, everything they hadn't said, could be erased by a few phone calls. I stared at the three of them. June, who only cared about keeping the family image polished. Harper, who didn't care about me at all until I stopped being useful. And Matthew, who stayed silent too long and only remembered I existed when the wedding started to crumble. It would have been easy to say no, to close the door and let them drown in the mess they made. But that wasn't me. Not entirely, I sighed. I'll help, Harper exhaled like she'd been underwater. But not for you, I added, locking eyes with her. And not because I forgive you, she blinked. I'm doing this because I love my brother, I said. Matthew looked at me, eyes shining. And because I don't want the people traveling across the country to be caught in the middle of this disaster. June opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. I have conditions. They all stilled. One, I said. I'll call the vendors, get things moving, but I won't pay another dime. Every deposit I placed has been refunded. If you want it back, you pay for it. Of course, Matthew nodded quickly. We'll cover it. Two, I continued, I will not be erased. My name will be on the program as event coordinator. Harper's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Three, I said, leaning forward, you will never speak to me the way you did again, ever, not at dinner, not at brunch, not behind closed doors. Harper's cheeks flushed. Understood. And four, I glanced at June. I will not pretend this didn't happen. She nodded, a single stiff motion. I'll start making calls, I said. You have 36 hours, don't waste them. They stood slowly. And for the first time in weeks, Harper reached out her hand. I looked at it. Then I looked away, she dropped it back to her side. And they left. I shut the door gently behind them. My tea had gone cold, but inside, I was just starting to feel warm again. It was strange. After all the noise, the tension, the pleading, the threats, the actual day felt eerily quiet. I woke up before sunrise, brewed a fresh pot of coffee, and sat at my window watching Napa Valley bloom under the misty morning light. Everything looked soft, peaceful, like nothing was about to unravel. My inbox was already full. The caterers were back on the schedule. The florist was preparing emergency arrangements. The tables were being rushed from the rental house with double overtime fees. Vendors responded quickly, some out of obligation, others with a quiet sort of respect. I didn't need to explain what happened. They'd pieced it together. Harper hadn't planned this wedding, I had. And now the pieces were falling back into place, not because of an apology, but because I'd chosen to put them there. By noon, I was on my third phone call and 10th checklist when Lena, my cafe manager, texted. So, did they beg or just implode? I smiled, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Bit of both. And then I added, I'm not doing it for them, I'm doing it for the guests, for the story not to end like that. Because some part of me still wanted it to matter, even if they didn't deserve it. By late afternoon, everything was in motion. But I didn't go to the venue. I didn't run centerpieces or double-check napkin folds. I coordinated it all from my living room, calmly, quietly, like the ghost of the wedding past. By 5 p.m., guests had begun to arrive. Messages trickled in again. Are we at the right place? Doors are locked. There's no music playing. I stood at the edge of the restaurant venue at exactly 5:42 p.m. in flats, not heels. Simple navy dress. Hair down, no badge, no clipboard, just me and what I'd built and unbuilt. The venue was open but bare, no Dacre, no staff, no sign of Harper or Matthew. A few guests wandered in, puzzled. No one greeted them. A couple stood near the bar, whispering. An elderly aunt checked her phone, confused. I walked farther in heart steady, expression calm. People looked up. Some recognized me, some didn't. All of them knew something was wrong. And then I saw Matthew. He entered from the far side, looking around like he'd walked into a dream that had crumbled mid-sentence. His tie was undone, his eyes frantic. He caught sight of me and moved fast. "Claire, what happened?" he asked, breathless. "You tell me," I replied. "Where's the staff, the music, the flowers?" I looked around. Seems like no one showed up. "I thought you called them back," he said, confused. "I did," I said evenly, "for tomorrow." His mouth opened. "What?" "There was no contract for today," I explained. "They were all canceled. The earliest they could return was tomorrow evening." He blinked. "But people are here now," he said. "I told Harper that," I added. "She insisted on keeping the original date." He rubbed his forehead. "She didn't tell me that." I shrugged. Not my responsibility anymore. Just then Harper entered, hair perfect, dress pressed, makeup fresh, but her face crumpled the moment she saw the room. Empty tables, no music, dozens of confused guests, and me standing still in the eye of the storm, her eyes locked on mine. "You said everything was fixed," she hissed, storming over. "I said the vendors were back on the books," I replied. "You never asked when." "This is a disaster," she seethed. "You humiliated us." "No," I said softly. "You did that to yourself." Guests were starting to notice. A quiet buzz of confusion, people staring. A woman in the corner raising her phone, recording, and then Harper made the mistake of trying to spin it. She stepped onto the small platform by the DJ booth, hands raised. "Everyone," she said, her voice trembling but theatrical. "We had a slight miscommunication with our team, but everything is still happening. Please be patient." No one clapped. No one cheered. They just watched, and then Matthew stepped forward. "Claire," he said loudly, turning to me, "can you tell everyone what happened?" I stared at him. "You want me to explain?" "Yes," he said, so I did. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The silence in the room had grown thick, like fog rolling in, swallowing every whisper and excuse before it had a chance to form. Dozens of guests turned toward me, wine glasses half raised, expressions frozen in polite confusion. Harper stood stiffly near the DJ booth, her smile faltering. Matthew waited beside me, jaw tight, as if daring me to say what he was now finally ready to hear, so I stepped forward. "I know this looks strange," I began, scanning the room. "You came expecting a wedding, a celebration, but instead you walked into confusion." I paused, letting the tension settle. "What you didn't see were the months leading up to this. The planning, the coordination, the late-night phone calls and vendor meetings. You didn't see the person behind all the deposits, behind the contracts, behind the details you were supposed to enjoy today." A few heads tilted, guests leaned in. "Because that person wasn't Harper." The air shifted. "She told me not to get involved," I said, my voice clear and steady. But by then it was too late. I had already built most of this, silently, quietly, out of love for my brother. My eyes landed on Harper then, her cheeks burning under the weight of every gaze. "She told me I wasn't real family, that I didn't belong in their new life." Murmurs began to ripple through the room. But I stepped back. I didn't fight her. I let her take the stage. And when I did, when I stopped, everything you see now happened. People looked around again, this time differently. Not just confused, but curious, and a little horrified. "I'm not telling you this to ruin the night," I added. "I'm telling you this because sometimes silence is mistaken for weakness. And I've been silent for too long." Harper moved forward, trying to intercept. "That's not what happened," she said quickly, her voice shaking. "You misunderstood." "I didn't," I said sharply. She flinched. "I didn't misunderstand being excluded or insulted or erased." Matthew stepped forward, putting a hand on Harper's shoulder. She shook it off. "You told me this was handled," he said to her quietly, not bothering to hide the anger in his voice. "I thought she'd just stay gone," Harper whispered, a little too loudly. A ripple of discomfort moved through the crowd. She realized it too late, her perfect mask cracked in real time. Matthew turned to me, eyes full of something I hadn't seen in months, clarity. "Claire," he said slowly, "you shouldn't have had to explain this." I didn't respond because he was right, but I wasn't finished. "I don't want pity," I said, facing the guests. "I want people to understand that sometimes the people behind the scenes are the ones holding the whole show together." A beat of silence. And then someone clapped. I didn't know who started it, but another followed, then another, until half the room was clapping, not wildly, not awkwardly, but thoughtfully, respectfully. Matthew looked at Harper. "You owe her an apology." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. He waited. So did everyone else. Finally, Harper turned to me. "I'm sorry," she said. Flat, begrudging, mechanical. A non-apology shaped into syllables. Matthew didn't look satisfied. "If you don't mean it," he said, "don't say it." Harper's mouth twitched. Then she turned away, arms crossed, retreating to the edge of the platform like a curtain had just fallen. The room was still. Matthew turned to me again. "What do you want to do?" The question wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was bigger. I exhaled slowly. "I want the vendors reinstated. The real celebration, music, food, everything happens tomorrow, like I told Harper it would. If she didn't relay that, that's not my fault." He nodded. "And tonight?" I looked around at the confused but still gathered guests. "We improvise." I walked to the front of the room, past Harper, and tapped the mic. "Well, everyone," I said, smiling genuinely for the first time in a while, "the ceremony is rescheduled, but the wine is still good. Let's call tonight a dress rehearsal with an open bar." Laughter broke out across the room. The tension lifted just slightly. And Harper? She faded into the background where she had tried to send me. Funny how quickly things turn. The fake celebration trickled into dusk. People laughed, hesitantly at first, then louder as the wine flowed and the awkwardness gave way to conversation. It was a strange kind of party, one that wasn't supposed to happen, held in a room dressed in nothing but tension and truth. But something was different now. People looked at me, really looked. Not as the overbearing sister, not as the invisible one, but as the person who had saved the day by letting it fall apart first. Matthew hovered near me most of the night, not in guilt, but in quiet acknowledgement. He refilled my drink. He nodded when our eyes met. He didn't say much, but sometimes silence can apologize better than words. Harper didn't speak again. She stood near the back, nursing a glass of wine, watching everyone like she was a stranger at her own party. Her dress was perfect. Her makeup still flawless, but her face, it had cracked. Every time someone approached me with kind words or a grateful smile, I felt her watching. And then just after 10, she snapped. It was quiet, no yelling, no scenes. But she walked over, slow and steady, and spoke in a low, tight voice only I could hear. "You couldn't let me have one thing." I turned to her. "One thing," I repeated. She smiled bitterly. "You've always needed to be his everything. I was supposed to be next, but you made this about you." "No," I said calmly. "You made this about control, and when you lost it, you blamed me for the mess you created." She shook her head. I really tried to be gracious, but you just couldn't stop playing the victim." My hands clenched at my sides. I leaned in, my voice firm but quiet. "You didn't try to be gracious, you tried to erase me. And when that didn't work, you called it drama." She laughed, bitter and tired. "And yet here you are, everyone clapping for the girl who canceled her brother's wedding." "I didn't cancel it," I said. "I saved it." She opened her mouth, but Matthew was suddenly beside us. "She did," he said, looking straight at Harper. "She saved it, you almost destroyed it." Harper's lips parted, but nothing came out. "You owe her more than an apology," Matthew continued. "You owe her credit. And if you can't give that, then maybe this wedding shouldn't happen." The room hushed again, as if sensing the final act arriving. Harper looked around, saw people watching, saw me not backing down, saw Matthew choosing his sister in front of everyone. Her voice shook when she finally said, "I'm sorry, Claire." But this time it was different. It wasn't sweet. It wasn't performative. It was broken. And for the first time, it felt real. I nodded, not out of victory, but out of peace. "I accept it," I said. "But don't mistake that for forgetting." She swallowed hard and stepped back. Matthew watched her go, then turned to me. "Thank you," he said. And when he hugged me, it wasn't out of guilt. It was gratitude. Earned. True. By the time the sun dipped behind the hills the next evening, the vineyard was transformed. The tables were dressed in soft ivory linens. Blush and burgundy flowers spilled from low centerpieces. The scent of garden roses and eucalyptus drifted through the warm air. A string quartet played softly from the corner of the courtyard. Everything I had once imagined for Matthew's wedding was finally here. And yet, as I stood at the edge of the scene in my slate blue dress, clipboard tucked away, I felt something I hadn't expected. Distance. Not rejection, not regret. Just space, earned, necessary space, from people who had taken too much for granted. The vendors worked like clockwork, respectful, efficient. Each one greeted me with a nod or a quiet smile. They knew who had made this possible. There was no confusion now. Guests wandered in, many of them more relaxed, more present than they had been the night before. The chaos had softened everyone's edges, even Harper's. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her smile slightly humbler, her gestures less sharp. She didn't avoid me, but she didn't pretend to be close either. Good. Matthew sought me out just before the ceremony. He stood beside me under a cluster of hanging lights, fidgeting with his cuffs. "You look beautiful," he said. "So do you," I smiled. He took a breath. "This day wouldn't exist without you. I know, and I won't forget it again." I didn't need him to promise, I just needed him to mean it. "I'm proud of you," I said softly. He looked away for a second, eyes shining. "I'm proud of you too." The music shifted then. The guests turned. Harper stepped onto the aisle. The ceremony began, and I stepped back deliberately, quietly into the shadows, because I didn't need to be in the spotlight to know my worth. I had rewritten my role, on my own terms. 6 months later, the vineyard was silent again. No lanterns, no music, no guests. Just wind threading through the rows of dormant vines and a chill settling across the earth. I drove past it sometimes on my way to the cafe, never stopping, never needing to. The wedding had happened. The flowers had bloomed, the cake had been cut, the vows exchanged. Everyone smiled for the camera. But under those polished moments lived something much more real. Truth. Thanksgiving came next. We gathered at June's house, smaller this year, quieter. Matthew carved the turkey. Harper set the table in silence, her movements measured, almost hesitant, like someone trying not to make waves. She said hello to me without flinching. No tension, no pretend sweetness, just a nod. A "Hi, Claire," with the weight of everything we didn't say baked into the space between us. Matthew made the toast. "To family," he said, lifting his glass. "The ones who remind us who we are and the ones who help us become better." He didn't look at Harper when he said it. He looked at me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for permission to belong. I just did. The room was quiet after that, not awkward, just still. And I smiled into it. Not because I'd won, but because I hadn't lost myself. Not to the silence, not to their expectations, not to the roles they tried to hand me. I had redrawn the lines. I had reclaimed my place. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real celebration.